G'day everybody, how you going today? It is so good to see you. Now, as you can see, I am channeling the rhyme of the ancient mariner, and we are out there in search of Moby Dick, or perhaps something equally as elusive as the Z7III and the Z8. What is next for the D850? What is next for the Z6 and the Z7 series? And now, with the arrival of the Z9 and Z9 firmware 2, I think we can safely say that the Z9 has landed. Yes, the Eagle has landed. Join me as we theorize what is next for the Z lineup. Oh, and before we do that, this is this, and this is from SmallRig, and this is pretty cool. This and Z coming next. SmallRig do a lot of cool stuff. We all know them for making cages for our cameras and all sorts of hardware that helps us work better when we are in the field. Well, now they're working on something else. Not only are they working on it, but here it is, lighting. And from my perspective, this is high quality and pretty affordable. Now, this is not flash lighting, this is continuous lighting. And what we have here is the RC120D. It comes with this cool carry case, which has a nice strap. Makes it good for being out in the field, and it's pretty well padded. We have our mains power supply, but it also comes with this here, which is a V-mount battery adapter. So you can run this light off batteries. Now, I think these lights are well constructed. I've been using this light up here for a couple of months, and it has worked absolutely superbly. We've got control of color temperature and brightness. Now, it does have a fan, but it only seems to come on when you are running at 100%. The rest of the time, if you get below, say, something like 80%, I haven't heard it come on. But of course, that is very dependent on the ambient temperature of where you're shooting. It feels like there's a lot of metal in the construction here, and of course, nowadays everything is not filament-based lighting. So you get a lot of light for a lot less power. Now, I do have to disclose that SmallRig did send me these lights. No money's changed hands. I can comfortably and confidently say this is a good quality light, and I would expect it to work for a long time to come. Now, it's great for film, and you could use it for photography as well. So it works for both. And as I said, it's fully adjustable for brightness and color temperature. It is not an RGB light. It has a standard Bowens style mount. So if you have other Bowens equipment, then it will mount no problem. And that is how you can control the light. Obviously, there's lots of different ways to control the light. And here is our panel at the back. And also it works with smartphone apps, which of course makes it way easier than going up there and changing things. That's the SmallRig RC120D. And here's all the specs and the pricing. Well, with the arrival of the Z9 and then surprisingly Z9 firmware version 2.0, I feel like a lot of questions about the Z lineup and about Nikon have been answered. One of the single biggest questions was, does Nikon have it in them? Now, for those who've been following this channel for a while, you know that I always thought that Nikon did, and it was all just a matter of time. Well, that has proven to be true. A little bit of time passed, and here we are. We know what sort of technology Nikon can bring to the table. And the Z9 is proof of concept, it's here, and it is in thousands of people's hands. And might I add, for those that don't have theirs yet, I hope they will be in your hands very, very soon. Rest assured, from my personal perspective, you have one of the best photographic tools, if not the best photographic tool arriving in your hands ever. It's worth the wait, and it's worth the cost. But the question is, for people who don't want a full-bodied camera and perhaps don't need 8K, what's coming for them? And what price point might it be? And how quickly should it happen? As we can see from a poll that I put up just 2 days ago, which has had so far 1,300 votes, there is a very clear demand here for what is next. Over 50% of the vote has gone to the Z7III or the Z8. There is a great deal of pent-up desire for these new cameras. Time is of the essence. Based on this data, based on this response, I think it makes sense for us to explore what might the Z7III and the Z8 be. So in today's video, I just want to talk through my current theories on what the lineup at the top end of the lineup might look like. So we will touch on the Z6III, the Z7III, and the Z8, if that even exists. Now with the Z6 II, which I own a copy of and I think it's an outstanding camera, and here we have the Z6 as well, this is an amazing entry-level workhorse camera. It shoots awesome 4K video. In the case of the 2, you get a cropped 4K 60. It's got some of the best dynamic range out there for stills, and for almost every use case, it is an astonishing all-rounder. No question. Of course, we will continue to have conversations around focus. So let's just pick that up and put it to one side, because there is so many opinions about focus, who needs what, is it any good for birding and action? And what I hear from thousands of you is some people are making it work for them and some people aren't. And that's completely cool. We're all different and we all just have to take that on board. Z6 and Z6 II are great all-rounder. So what might be next for the Z6 range? Based on what Sony have done with the A7 IV, I think there is a very high chance that the Z6 III will be something similar. I think it may well have a 33 megapixel sensor that allows it to have higher video specs and maybe even as high as something like 6K. So then what the Z6 III can be is it continues to be that great all-rounder, slightly increased video specs, slightly increased stills specs, because we have to keep in mind going from 24 megapixels to 33 megapixels only actually gives us about an extra 1,000 pixels on the long edge. So it sounds like a lot, but in real world usage and actually printing and so on, it's not that big a difference. So I can certainly see a jump like that happening. Now, what technology from the Z9 might come down to a Z6 III? Now that depends a lot on price point. As I said, I don't believe we'll be getting 8K. We'll be getting something less. And that could be all sorts of things. We've seen that Nikon has gone with all sorts of sizes in the Z9 for video, 5.6 and 4.1 and 8.3. So really they can choose what best suits the sensor. What are most people interested in? Well, most people are interested in the autofocus and the different focus modes improving. So if I was Nikon, I'd be putting that technology into the Z6 III, as much of it as I could. And I think the only question left for me is, will we get an electronic shutter? Stacked backside illuminated sensors are expensive at the start of their life, but the more they exist, the more they're out there, the cheaper they become. And well, Canon have them, Sony have them, Nikon have them. We believe that Fuji are about to have them too. There's a chance with a camera that is in, I suppose, the $2,000 to $3,000 bracket that we may see a stacked BSI sensor. And potentially it comes without a shutter. But I just think that's potentially, to me, that's the biggest question mark. I think the rest of it could trickle down, and it's just a matter of whether that blazing fast technology will be available at that sort of price point. Well, to be honest with you, I think, as I talked about in this video here, we have a lot of 45 megapixel cameras. And I think the reason there are a lot of 45 megapixel cameras in the Nikon lineup is it's a really good sized sensor. So my belief is, like the Z6 III, the Z7 III will have a lot of the technology from the Z9 when it comes to the autofocus system, the thing that is most talked about. I think it's critical that as much of that can come down from the Z9 into the Z7 III. Video specs, well, it might shoot 8K, but I don't think it'll shoot it for 2 hours. It'll certainly have a sensor big enough to do it, but don't expect it to have all the internal codecs and the long record times. But it'll do 8K, it'll do 4K, it'll do all those things, but in a reduced manner. And of course, it's in a smaller body, so that continues to make heat more of an issue than it is with the Z9. So the Z7 III, I do think it'll be a lot like a Z9, just with reduced specs. Now, people might be interested in, is the Z7 III going to be 20 frames per second RAW and all that sort of stuff? Well, maybe. So if there's any camera that makes the most sense to be what the D700 was to the D3, I believe it is the Z7 III. In other words, keep the megapixel count the same. Maybe massage it a little bit, but still the difference between 33 megapixels and 45 is probably enough. So basically make the Z7 III a cut down Z9. Give it the focus system. Don't give it the same long 8K. Don't give it all of the great codecs that are in the Z9, like ProRes RAW, 60p RAW, all of that crazy stuff. It's a cut down version. And I think that camera could very much exist, and it may or it may not have a mechanical shutter. And I think it would fit exactly in the middle between a Z6 III and a Z9. So let's say it's maybe $2,500 for the Z6 III, $5,500 for the Z9. So maybe it's $4,000. It would be a lot of camera in a small body, just like this Z7, does a lot of what the Z9 does. Maybe doesn't have the electronic shutter, doesn't have the crazy video spec. And you know, maybe it only shoots at 15 frames per second in RAW or something like that. You certainly, if it's going to be a bit cheaper, it won't have all of it, but maybe it'll just be the video side of it that's cut down. To reiterate what the Z7 III might be, very much a Z9, but just not the same crazy video spec. 2 hours of 8K, the RAW, the ProRes RAW, and so on. Now, what do we think the Z8 is going to be? Well, I've always speculated that the replacement of the D850 is not a D850. It's more than a D850. Now, Sony have had their A7R4, I think, for something like 2 or 3 years at this point in time. And that has been packing over 60 megapixels of resolution. I can see if the Z8 comes and it actually exists, that there's a very good chance it could be that camera, and it could be 60 megapixels or it could be more. We've had 2 or 3 years of advancement in technology. And of course, we believe the A7R5 is probably coming later this year, and it may or may not have a bit of a pixel bump as well. So I believe the replacement for the D850 would be the Z8. It would have higher than 45 megapixels, perhaps 60 megapixels or more, and I think it'll shoot 8K, but like the Z7 III, I think it will not have the same video spec as the Z9. Might still have 8K, but not all of the RAW and not the ProRes RAW and all of those sorts of things built in. I'm sure you'd be able to do it with an Atomos Ninja 5 Plus or something like that externally, but that's the price you pay for a smaller body and the fact that it just can't dissipate as much heat. If it existed, I would expect it to maybe have a little bit of a premium on the Z7 III. So what? Maybe $500. Then the question you have to ask yourself, do we really need a 33 megapixel camera, a 45 to 50 megapixel camera, and a 60 to 70 megapixel camera? Well, some people would say yes. And I suppose if the bodies are all very similar, you only have to make one type of body. That is something that Sony has championed through the whole Alpha career. They really have used the same body and the same switchgear. So then it's not really as big a deal to change out the internals. And you're certainly going to make something for everybody. I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether we will have the Z7 III and the Z8. It really just depends on the market. I think Nikon would like to have it, and I think the market would like to have it, but it's just on whether the market is large enough to support all of these lines and the R&D and everything that goes along with having these lines. Because let's not forget, We've still got the Z5, we've still got the Z50, we've still got the ZFC. And I do think there's probably more to come at the entry level. Why doesn't the Z50 have an update, or the Z5? I don't think we should be expecting a new ZFC anytime soon, because it's not even a year old. More to come at the entry level, no idea when that's coming, but they're my thoughts around the Z6III, the Z7III, and the Z8. My thought is I think we will see some or all of that over the next 18 months or so, with at least one of those high-end cameras, the Z7III or the Z8, in the next 6 to 12 months. That's my best guess. But who really knows? I mean, there's a lot of things going on outside of what we want and outside of just the industry in the world. The world is a pretty tumultuous place at the moment. We know that certain areas of the world are still struggling with supply chain issues, and then of course we have the uncertainty in the Northern Hemisphere. None of this makes getting product out any easier. My perspective is, being a glass half full person, we just have to be patient and wait and see what happens. I want to reiterate at the end of this video, the Z9 is here. It's outstanding. Firmware 2.0 is really bringing a lot to the table. It feels like it's just refined a little bit more, which is really nice, and obviously all of these features are really cool that have been added. I'm confident that whatever comes next, the good bits are going to trickle down to each camera in its various vertical, whether it's kind of the Z6 vertical, the Z7 vertical, or what might be a D850 replacement. And talking about the D850 replacement, I will reiterate, if a Z7III comes along as I've described it, it's high frame rates, it's got the great focus system of the Z9, and video is a little bit cut down from the Z9, I do think that might be a D500 replacement. I still do, because you can crop these cameras and get almost 20 megapixels, yet you still get the crazy high frame rates. And it's kind of becomes the best of both worlds. And if they can get the price point right, it might be the case. And the other option is the Z6III might also be a full frame D500 replacement. I'm still pretty uncertain as to whether we will see a professional and enthusiast level cropped sensor camera from Nikon in the Z range. Who knows? Of course it's easy to do, but it's not the fact that it's easy to do, it just comes back to how many lines do they want to support. And I think in the market, as it's looking at the moment, I think Nikon Rumors showed us some charts recently that they were expecting the world to sell about 5 million, 5.2, 5.4 million cameras this year, and Nikon Rumors actually predicted it would be more like 4.5 million cameras. So these companies, they just have to think about how many lines they want to support. It's a really important part of good, effective business operation. I would love to know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about the Z6III, Z7III, Z8? Do you think what I'm suggesting here sounds plausible? Please write in the comments below what you think these machines might be. And of course, I will never let go of my hope that we get a medium format Z. Who knows? I would love to see it. I would love to see a GFX sized censored Z camera. So good to see you. If this is your first time here, I would love to see you again. So please do subscribe, share, like, check out the website. I'll see you soon.